The game of KeyForge is full of some very strong creatures. Whether it be in terms of power, with examples such as Grimlocust Ducks or Khalifi Dragon, or in terms of effects, like in the cases of Chronophage or P.I. Sweven, there are many creatures that are a real threat when they hit the board. However, there is a type of creature in KeyForge that, in most cases, stands far above all other creatures in regards to their strength. These are the types of creatures that can absolutely ruin your opponent if left undealt with. The type of creature that your opponent will be dedicating all of their resources to in order to remove it from the board. This video is a history of the scariest, strongest creatures in the game of KeyForge, those of witches. When it comes to witches, the most classic example is undoubtedly Hunting Witch, a 2-power untamed creature from Call of the Archons that grants you the incredibly simple but extremely potent effect of, each time you play another creature, gain 1 Ember. On its own, Hunting Witch is already insane, but when combined with other Coda Untamed cards, it becomes a creature that absolutely cannot be left undealt with. Cards like Full Moon, Dust Pixie, Nature's Call, KeyCharge, Chota Hazri, Fuzzy Gruen all complement the effect given by Hunting Witch. Oh, and one note about Chota Hazri, he actually happens to be a witch himself. That's right, one of the witches is actually a key cheat. I told you these guys are powerful. Anyway, Hunting Witch is a critical tool in the OTK toolbox. That is, the perfect set of cards that give decks the ability to OTK, or one-turn kill. These decks can forge all 3 keys in a single turn, winning the game instantly, giving the opponent no chance to react whatsoever. The immense power Hunting Witch possessed led to it never being seen again, although throughout the sets following Call of the Archons, its general concept of gaining an Ember for every creature played has evolved to make it more balanced. We first see this 2 sets later in Worlds Collide, in the form of Harmonia. Harmonia has the same 2 power as Hunting Witch, but has Elusive, and reads, after you play a creature, if there are more enemy creatures than friendly creatures, gain 1 Ember. Harmonia essentially attached a condition to Hunting Witch to make things a little more balanced. Still a very strong effect, but not quite as straightforward and simple as Hunting Witch, and still made for a must-kill creature. Finally, after Harmonia, Hunting Witch evolved one last time into Chelonia, who we all know and love today in Dark Tidings. In Chelonia's case, you only gain an Ember for playing a creature when the tide is high, which is not only yet another balanced variation on Hunting Witch, but also holds to the theme of Dark Tidings, and adds some thought into potentially needing to raise the tide to get Chelonia's effect to go off. Chelonia also has an Evil Twin variant, where instead of you gaining Ember by playing creatures, the opponent loses Ember by you playing creatures. It makes for some really excellent Ember control when the tide is high, and can be really annoying for the opponent to deal with. Ultimately, I think Hunting Witch's evolution into Harmonia, then Chelonia, was a good choice by the designers to make Untamed a more fun and balanced house overall, while doing a good job of not nerfing the effect to the point of it being useless. Meanwhile, throughout the first 3 sets of KeyForge, Hunting Witch's polar opposite was hard at work, the witch Teliga. Teliga gained you an Ember every time the opponent plays a creature, which can certainly put them in quite a predicament. Direct damage and removal is the best way to deal with this creature if you don't have any creatures down on the board. But if you don't have any of that, chances are high you'll have to give the opponent some free Ember to set up for a turn later down the road where you can destroy her. Teliga is a real nuisance and really changes the feel of the game when she's played. There were a couple other witches in Call of the Archons, and one of them was Witch of the Wilds. She reads, during each turn in which Untamed is not your active house, you may play 1 Untamed card. Besides Phase Shift and a number of other cards and logos, Witch of the Wilds was one of the very first examples of house cheating in KeyForge, and thus offered a level of versatility found in very few other places in Coda, making her a dangerous force to be very quickly reckoned with. If left undealt with, she could quickly give your opponent a decent advantage, allowing them to play 1 Untamed card turn after turn without ever calling Untamed, and with the sheer number of absolute powerhouse cards in Untamed, that's a terrifying prospect. The last witch in Call of the Archons is one equally as dangerous, if not more so, that of Witch of the Eye. Whenever she reaps, she puts a card from your discard pile back into your hand, and that sort of recursion is extremely powerful, especially with the amount of great cards found in Coda. She can put crazy cards like Fertility Chant, Control the Weak, Miasma, and KeyCharge back into your hand, allowing for huge Ember bursts, or for forging multiple keys in a turn, or just for bringing back cards that your opponent really doesn't want to see again. While Witch of the Eye may not always seem like that big of a threat all the time, trust me, she is, and is a must-kill creature, just like all the witches that have been discussed so far. The next set, Age of Ascension, introduced 3 new witches, and the first of these is the mediocre Darna. Her play effect offers the potential to burst, seeing as she gains you an ember for every damaged friendly creature, but chances are you probably won't have too many of those on your side of the board at any given time. Sometimes you will, and the burst will be enormous, but those situations I feel are few and far between. She also has a reap effect that allows you to heal 2 damage from a friendly creature, but healing is a pretty unremarkable mechanic within KeyForge, so even that doesn't add much. But whereas Darna is somewhat of a disappointing witch, the next one certainly isn't, and that is the legendary Dusk Witch. Dusk Witch only existed for one set, and it's not hard to see why. This is a 1-power elusive creature that reads, quite simply, "Your creatures enter play ready." Those 5 words strike fear into whoever it is that's unfortunate enough to face this creature down. However, Dusk Witch is an Omega, meaning you have to end your turn once you play her down, and that gives your opponent an opportunity to deal with her before you get the chance to really go wild. But if you play her down, and she's not dealt with on your opponent's turn, it's almost guaranteed that your next turn will be an incredible one that will propel you far ahead of your opponent and leave them scrambling to catch up. As a turn 1 play, your opponent is instantly put on their back foot, and they are forced to find a way to deal with her as quickly as possible. Dusk Witch's sheer power led to her only being around for 1 set, but a little farther down the road, in Mass Mutation, a variation on Dusk Witch was created, that of Fandangle. Similar to how Harmonia and Chelonia changed up Hunting Witch by attaching a balanced condition, Fandangle was essentially made to be a more balanced version of Dusk Witch, and reads, "While you have 4 Ember or more, your non-untamed creatures enter play ready." While not quite as potent as Dusk Witch, Fandangle still poses quite a threat. And you'll notice that Fandangle's other trait is that of Mutant, which means he synergizes quite well with a number of cards in the Mass Mutation card pool. He works well with cards like Pismire, Professor Torado, Dark Ember Vault, and Vault's Blessing, giving him significant value beyond just his written effect. The last of the 3 new witches added to Age of Ascension is Grovekeeper, who's not quite as threatening as Dusk Witch or Fandangle, but still gives each of his neighboring creatures a +1 power counter at the end of your turn. If left undealt with, he can really beef creatures up, making them unnecessarily difficult to remove from the board. He's even more dangerous when paired up with the Dusk Witch in a deck. A 1-power Dusk Witch is scary enough, but over a number of turns with Grovekeeper bumping up Dusk Witch's power to 2, 3, or even 4, that's an even worse thought, and by that point the opposing player has probably been left at such a disadvantage that it's just about hopeless for them to win. Grovekeeper is definitely a nice card, and despite not having the most wild of abilities, is still a threat that must be answered sooner or later. Later on, Worlds Collide introduced the concept of leaders, creatures that, when in the center of the battle line, offered a strong and unique effect befitting of the house it was found in. In fact, I recently made a video ranking all 8 of the house leaders in the game from worst to best. I'll leave a link to that video down in the description. Anyway, the leader found in House Untamed was Eldest Bear, one of the few creatures in the game with 3 traits, one of them being Witch. Eldest Bear is an interesting creature, having Assault 3 and reading, "While Eldest Bear is in the center of your battle line, it gains before fight gain 2 Ember." Eldest Bear offers a nice combination of board control through fighting and Ember generation all in one, making for a versatile creature, and something of a threat when in the center of the battle line. Compared to most of the other witch creatures in Worlds Collide, Eldest Bear is certainly among the better ones, and you'll see why. The next witch is Deepwood Druid. Deepwood Druid fully heals a neighboring creature when you play him down, and whenever you reap with him, and his deploy allows you to play him down wherever he's most needed, which is a nice touch. However, I'm not sure if I prefer him over Darna or not. Deepwood Druid doesn't gain you any Ember upon play like Darna does, and Darna allows you to heal damage from any friendly creature you want, whereas Deepwood Druid only heals his neighboring creatures. As I've said before, healing is not the greatest of effects in most cases, and seeing as that's all Deepwood Druid does, and in a very limited capacity, I feel like he's a pretty lame creature, especially in terms of witches. Next up, however, is a slightly more interesting one, the Feathered Shaman, who has the Fight Reap effect of warding each of his neighbors. When placed properly in a battle line, Feathered Shaman can be a real nuisance, protecting high priority creatures and making itself into something that must be taken out before the other creatures can be dealt with. Another interesting fact about Feathered Shaman is that it's one of the only 2 untamed cards in the whole game that ward, the other one being Mercy Malkin Queen from Mass Mutation. And would you look at that, Mercy Malkin Queen happens to be a witch herself. For me, Mercy is one of the more interesting witches in the game. She's 3 power, has Skirmish, and reads, "After a friendly cat creature enters play, ward it. Fight, ready a friendly beast creature." Her ward effect interacts exclusively with cat creatures, of which there happen to be 3, Eunoia, Flumph, and Lumalu. All 3 of them also happen to be beasts, So together with Mercy, their synergy is incredible, warding each other and readying each other and giving each other extra power or reaping for huge amounts of Ember. Mercy Malkin Queen has to be one of my favorite witches in the game, simply because of the type of creature she interacts with, and the great synergy found between herself and those creatures. One more witch was introduced into Worlds Collide, and that is Xenos Bloodshadow. This guy has some pretty crazy keywords, possessing Elusive, Hazardous 6, Poison, and Skirmish. Before discovering Xenos Bloodshadow, I thought that Briar Grubling's Hazardous 5 was the highest in the game, but I guess it's not, and as a result Xenos is practically impossible to fight into, especially stacked with that Elusive. And when it comes to fighting, he can take out nearly any creature he wants with that Poison, and not receive any damage back due to the Skirmish. Xenos Bloodshadow always comes paired with a Toad in the decks he appears in. Toad is just a 1-power creature that can't reap, so in those decks you get one absolute bomb of a creature, and one creature that's as useless as they get. And apparently, this Toad, according to its flavor text, is actually Prince Derek Unifier from Age of Ascension. Moving on to Mass Mutation, there's one last witch from that set that needs to be discussed, and that is Dark Harbinger. Whenever you play an Untamed action card, Dark Harbinger gets readied, making him an excellent creature for some intense Ember Burst. He always comes with at least one copy of a Mutation action card, which includes Mutation of Fury, Mutation of Instinct, and Mutation of Cunning. Sometimes he'll appear with just one of these, or sometimes two, or all three, or doubles of one. It varies from deck to deck, but these cards complement Dark Harbinger perfectly. There are also other great Untamed actions to go along with this stuff as well, such as Song of the Wild to give you 2 Ember every time you reap, or Fertility Chant to give you 4 Ember upon play, etc. Ultimately, Dark Harbinger is a fantastic burst card, and is usually a real threat in the decks he appears in. There are just a couple witches left to cover, and they both appear in Dark Tidings. The first of these is Witch of the Dawn, an incredibly versatile creature that reads, Play, return a creature from your discard pile to your hand. Since he's a common, he can appear in multiples, but whether there are multiples of him or not, he still makes for some really fantastic recursion, bringing valuable creatures back into play. Witch of the Dawn has an evil twin version, and I think the evil twin is even more powerful than the original in certain situations. It reads, Play, destroy another friendly creature. If you do, play a different creature from your discard pile, ready and use that creature. That's a crazy effect. It's very similar to the Dis action card Exhume, in that you get to play any creature you want from your discard pile, but Evil Witch of the Dawn allows you to then ready and use that creature, which adds so much versatility and utility to your turn. The only catch is that you need to destroy one of your own creatures to do any of this, but that's totally fine in most scenarios. You could potentially destroy your Key Frog if you happen to have one of those on the board, and thus forge a key if you have enough Ember. You could destroy others such as Bren the Fanatic or Seabringer Krakoa. But even if you don't have any of those creatures, destroying a friendly creature is definitely worth it to get the rest of Evil Witch of the Dawn's effect to go off. The last witch creature in KeyForge is Dredging Druid, whose 2-power, elusive, and interacts with the tide with a reap effect that reads, If the tide is high, put up to 3 creatures from your discard pile on top of your deck. Not only does this make for some incredible creature recursion, which has always been one of Untamed's strongest facets, but it also allows you to set up for a banger next turn. Because it's such a low power creature, Dredging Druid probably won't be sticking around for long, but if you do get to use her at least once, even that has potential to be extremely useful. And that is every single witch creature in the game of KeyForge. There are 21 total, and from the very beginning they have always been creatures with uniquely high value effects that are a must kill for the opponent. Throughout the sets, we've seen them evolve to become more fair and balanced overall, as we discussed with Hunting Witch's evolution into Harmonia and Chelonia, or with Dusk Witch's evolution into Fandangle. Although not all the witches are quite as powerful as others, such as in the case of Deepwood Druid or Grovekeeper, they have always been a staple of House Untamed. And with Untamed rotating out of the house lineup for the next set, Winds of Exchange, I'm interested to see if the new house, or any of the other houses, will inherit witch creatures of their own, or if witches will just be gone from the game entirely. Let me know what you guys think about these witch creatures. I'm definitely keen to hear your thoughts. Thank you all so much for watching, and I can't wait to see you guys again in the next one. See you later.